Siddhartha Sadbhai is looking for answers. He's been following clues for years, and now new evidence has brought him to Russia. The mystery he's trying to solve has fascinated generations of Indians. Books, allegations, debates, inquiry commissions, and conspiracy theories have continued, and the controversy still makes headlines. What happened to Subhash Chandra Bose? The story of India's struggle for independence from British rule has several heroes. One freedom fighter in particular continues to make news. Subhash Chandra Bose, or Netaji, was president of the Indian National Congress.
India is going to be free.
He was also leader of the Indian National Army during the Second World War. But his life is still overshadowed by the mysteries surrounding his death. According to the official version, he died in a plane crash on August 18, 1945.
Subash Chandra did not die in the plane crash.
So, what really happened to Netaji? The enduring question spans a complex web of characters, places, and international politics. Why did the government of India keep the files relating to his death secret for 70 years? What's in the files declassified in January 2016?
The declassified files in India are only the tip of the iceberg.
Is it true that Bose returned to India and lived incognito as a wandering monk?
Neither the Gumnami Baba nor the Shaulmari Sadhu, none of them are Subhash Chandra Bose.
Was Subhash Chandra Bose actually somewhere else on the day of the supposed plane crash?
Subash Chandra Bose spent the night of 17th August 1945 in my grandfather's house in Saigon. He was still in Saigon on 18th August 1945.
The fact that he died as a result of a plane crash is beyond all doubt.
But why was his death certificate issued 43 years later? Was it more than coincidence that Bose's supposed death occurred the very day that Japan surrendered and the Second World War ended? What is the world hiding? On the afternoon of August 17, 1945, commander of the Indian National Army, Subhash Chandra Bose, boards a converted Japanese Mitsubishi Sally bomber at Saigon, Vietnam. With him are Colonel Habibur Rahman, his ADC, and Lieutenant General Tsunamasa Shidai, Vice Chief of Japan's Kwantung Army, based in Manchuria. According to the flight plan, they are going to Taihoku in Taiwan, then onwards to Dairen in Manchuria, and finally to Tokyo. But the plane makes an unscheduled night halt at Turin in Vietnam. Early the next morning, the plane takes off from Turin, bound for Taihoku, flying over the South China Sea. After lunch in Taihoku, the passengers reboard the plane at 1400 hours for the next scheduled stop, Dairen in Manchuria. Suddenly, at 2,000 feet, the plane is rocked by an explosion. The port engine is on fire, and the plane begins to lose height. The aircraft nosedives while attempting to return to Taihoku airfield. The two pilots and General Shidai are killed instantly. Bose is badly burned and is carried to the Taihoku Field Hospital. Later that evening, Subhash Chandra Bose dies. The dead bodies of Bose, Shidai, and the two pilots are cremated on August 20th, 1945, at the Taihoku Crematorium. This is the official Japanese version of events. London-based white hat hacker Siddhartha Sadbhai does not accept the plane crash theory. He has been investigating it since 2012.
I firmly believe that the Taihoku plane crash never actually took place. Not only based on the statements by the Taiwanese government, who have clearly stated there was no plane crash on that day, but from other further evidence we have. It just shows you how elaborate cover-ups can be. I mean, they literally had eyewitnesses, nurses, doctors who can tell you down to the detail about how they treated him, about his burn wounds, about what he said, right up to the moment he allegedly died. I would imagine Bose himself, through Japanese help, orchestrated this entire idea. So he couldn't have done this on his own. They were facilitating everything.
Early on in his quest, Subbhai was provided clues by Anonymous, an internet-based collective of black hat hackers who want the truth about Bose revealed.
Somebody out there affiliated with Anonymous Group is very interested in this case as well. They've been helping me and pointing me in the right direction, as if they already know something more, and they're just throwing a few crumbs here and there for me to connect the dots. I received the first lead from Anonymous in roughly 2014. I got an email with a very, very grainy clip, and it said there's a person of interest in this clip for you. He's in the conference hall. And it's only after viewing it maybe 5 or 6 times that I realized it wasn't the people in the foreground that were of interest, but one guy standing right behind them who, you know, any way you look at it, he just looks like Bose.
The search for answers leads Subbhai to Moscow. The Russian capital is an important location in the hunt for clues about what happened to Bose and of his rumored life after 1945. Was Russia Bose's ideological home, as India was his emotional one? Did he live in freedom in Soviet Russia, or was he held captive? Memorial is an organization in Moscow that helps people locate family members who were banished to the Soviet Gulag. The Soviet Gulag is a cluster of slave labor camps in Siberia, created by Soviet dictator Stalin in the 1930s. Here, opponents of the Soviet communist regime were exiled to work and die. At the time, foreigners in the Soviet Union usually lived only in Moscow. Records of cases involving them are kept in the archives of the FSB, the successor of the KGB, or Soviet secret police. But it's a dead end.
В случае с разыскиваемым Чандра Босом, Субха Чандра Босом, нужно задать вопрос, есть ли сведения о его репрессии. Если есть разночтение в имени, разные фамилии, возможно, человек находился под другими именами, надо обязательно перечислить все возможные имена.
Next, Subbhai meets Olga at Moscow's Netfilm that accesses and licenses video footage and stills from Russian archives. Subbhai gives Olga the reference clip of footage showing a mystery Indian present at the 1966 peace talks between India and Pakistan in Tashkent, Russia. He had received the grainy clip from Anonymous. Subbhai calls him the Tashkent Man. Olga finds the original rushes in the Russian State Archive outside Moscow. She finds the footage and runs it through her Steinbeck film editing machine to select the identified shots. Then she compiles the footage and digitizes it. It can now be structured into a format for forensic analysis. The Tashkent Man is seen here standing behind Indian Prime Minister Shastri and Pakistani President Ayub Khan. Could this be Bose? If so, what had happened to him between his disappearance in 1945 and the talks in 1966? Had he always been in Moscow? Moscow has also been second home to Dr. Purabi Roy, visiting professor at Moscow University. In 1994, the Calcutta-based Asiatic Society sponsored her visit to Russia to collect archival materials on Indo-Russian relations. Here, she met Alexander Kolesnikov, then a major general in the Soviet army.
Alexander Kolesnikov is a good friend of mine. After the disintegration of Soviet Union, actually he engaged himself mainly with the military archives, writing some articles and books. Once Kolesnikov Alexander said that he came across many papers on Subash Chandra Bose in GRU or GRU military archive. Then I requested him that if you can get some information, the existence of Subash Chandra Bose after 1945, that alleged plane crash. He said, my God, you can't imagine that how many papers are lying there. They allowed him to enter without any pen or paper. You have to bring everything in your memory. And I just told him that do one thing. Keep the number in your mind and the persons who are there and the date. That will be enough for me.
Kolesnikov revealed that Bose's future was discussed in October 1946 at a cabinet meeting attended by Stalin, Yakov Malik, Vyshinsky and Molotov.
Дело в том, что те материалы, которые связаны с государственной тайной, и госпожа Политбюро в этом убедилась, когда работала в разных архивах Москвы, они могут быть закрыты для исследователя.
These secret files are stored in Podolsk and at the headquarters of the former Soviet Secret Police, or KGB, in Moscow. In the late 1990s, Mr. Joyanta Roy of the Forward Bloc Party, founded by Subhash Bose, was in Moscow with an Indian parliamentary delegation. He also met Kolesnikov.
Kolesnikov Alexander showed us some photographs. Netaji was there in Moscow, Azad Hind government's embassy, and he was present in 1946. Therefore, the story of 1945, 18th August doesn't stand.
In defiance of British rule, Bose had set up a government of free India in exile in Singapore in 1943. This government was recognized by the Soviet Union, despite the Soviets being allies of the British in the ongoing Second World War. Did this give Bose diplomatic immunity and ensure his safety in Stalin's Russia after the war ended in 1945?
Я все-таки приверженец точки зрения такой, что по Босу существовало некое секретное соглашение между СССР и между Англией. Почему я так думаю? Потому что Англия ревностно следила за тем, что происходит в Индии, и она не могла оставить без контроля все происходящее там. Я не исключаю, что исчезновение Боса, а смертью это назвать сложно, я все-таки сторонник, что исчезновение было.
But did things change for Bose after Stalin died in 1953?
Я думаю, что после смерти Сталина поменялась сама концепция и отношение к Азии, и отношение к Индии. И, честно говоря, сомневаюсь, что если бы вот верить, опять же, вот этой версии, чтобы здесь был Бос как-то нужен для Советского Союза. Он больше бы был нужен при Сталине в эпоху ту, а после Сталина, мне представляется, что нет.
Bose was in Moscow from 1945 to 53 till Stalin's death, and we can say that he was in Stalin's custody.
In the new Soviet Union, could Bose have become redundant and been either executed or banished to the Gulag? After all, 45 Indians, including Abani Mukherjee, co-founder of the Communist Party of India, were shot under Stalin's instructions between 1937 and 1939. Do the answers for what happened to Bose lie in secret records at the Lubyanka prison in Moscow? Meanwhile, Sadbhai is investigating a sensational claim. If proved, it could demolish the plane crash story. Siddhartha Sadbhai returns from Moscow to London with a digital copy of the 1966 film clip. In it is a mystery man. Sadbhai calls him the Tashkent Man. It's a term that's made a lot of news. The big question remains, is the Tashkent Man really Subhash Chandra Bose? He doesn't look exactly like Bose. But could that be the result of plastic surgery? A forensic facial analysis of the man's pictures could reveal the answer. From London, Sadbhai takes a train to York in the north of England. He is here to see forensic specialist Neil Miller. Neil Miller formerly served in the Signals Regiment of the British Army. He now has a forensic laboratory in the outskirts of York. Miller analyzes the visual evidence. He compares the available pictures of Bose and the Tashkent Man. It is not a quick process. Finally, Miller concludes that there is a very high degree of likelihood that Bose and the Tashkent Man is one and the same person. This is the first scientific study that says the Tashkent Man is probably Bose. So, if Bose was at the Tashkent Beast Office in January 1966, how can we still believe that he died in a plane crash in 1945? Bose's grandnephew questions the plane crash theory. His grandfather, Sri Chandra Bose, was the elder brother of Subhash Chandra Bose. He was also a top trial lawyer.
Habibur Rahman, who was probably the main witness to establish the plane crash theory, had come to Kolkata and met my grandfather, Sarat Chandra Bose, in 1946. He had come dressed in his INA uniform. Subhash Chandra Bose catches fire, dies of third-degree burns. General Shide also dies. Many other people die. But Habibur Rahman, like a phoenix, jumps out of the plane without a scratch. Because Habib said that I tried to save Subhash. I immediately embraced him from the back, trying to douse the flame. So Sharat Bose asked that, Habib, what were you wearing? He said, why, sir, this uniform? So Sharat asked that, this particular uniform? He said, yes. It was well starched. There was no sign of any burns. He said, Subhash was wearing this watch when he died. Only a slight burn mark on the strap. My father had taken this watch to a laboratory in London and done some testing. It was found that there was no fire. The wristband of the watch, there was acid applied on the surface. Subhash never wore a rectangular watch. Sharat Bose told my father, Omyo, that Habib is not telling the truth. Habib is telling what his leader wants him to say.
In 1999, the Government of India constituted the Mukherjee Commission of Inquiry. Justice Manoj Mukherjee, a retired judge of the Supreme Court of India, led the inquiry. Its mission was to investigate the death of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Over 7 years, the inquiry pursued evidence across Taiwan, Japan, and Russia. Its findings were controversial. According to the Mukherjee Commission report, Bose did not die in the plane crash in Taipei on August 18, 1945, as widely accepted. Instead, the plane crash was a ploy created with Japanese help for Bose to escape. Even the ashes kept in Tokyo's Renkoji Temple, commonly believed to be Bose's, are in fact the remains of a Japanese soldier named Ichiro Okura. Ashish Ray, another grandnephew of Bose, is a London-based journalist. He does not agree with the report.
The Mukherjee Commission has not been accepted as a report by the government of India. Number one is that 6 people who experienced the plane crash with Subhash Chandra Bose lived to tell their story. Number 2, there were 5 people at his bedside when he passed away. Each one of them gave evidence that they were there at his bedside. And number 3, there are at least 3 eyewitnesses to the cremation that took place in Taipei. There are any number of people who will testify to you as to how they carried the ashes, the remains from Taipei to Tokyo.
Investigating other theories, the Mukherjee Commission rejected claims that either Bhagwanji or Gumnami Baba of Faizabad or the Bengal-based Shaul Meri Baba was Bose in disguise.
मैं सुभाष बोल रहा हूं. पूरे 1 साल से मैं
In January 1967, Radio Moscow's Hindi service broadcast a speech from Tashkent by a Subhash Chandra. The incident is reported in a Hindi tabloid, Vishwa Neta, leading to questions in the Indian Parliament. According to recently declassified Bose papers, the Indian government launched an inquiry under the Intelligence Bureau. But it could not be established who made the broadcast. The Russians did not provide any audio recording of the speech. The inquiry met an unsatisfactory end. The controversy about Bose's death or disappearance continues to simmer. The mystery thickens. But why is Bose important to India? What makes him a legendary figure in India's struggle for independence? Do the answers lie in the story of his life and the mood of the times he grew up in? Subhash Chandra Bose was born to a wealthy Bengali family in Cuttack on January 23, 1897. After a BA in philosophy at Calcutta, he left for England in 1919 to study at Cambridge. Siddhartha Sadbhai retraces Bose's steps. At Cambridge, Bose read for the Moral Sciences Tripos at Fitzwilliam House's Fitzwilliam Hall. It was later moved to a new location and named Fitzwilliam College. The college archivist shows Satbhai unseen records of Bose in Cambridge.
Here is the indication of the beginning of his official status as a member of Cambridge University. And he matriculated as a member of Cambridge University on the 19th of November 1919, and here we see his individual record.
Bose's impressionable years in Cambridge may have shaped his nationalist thoughts and actions. His father too had returned his title of Rai Bahadur. Bose, in turn, refused to join the Indian civil service. After all, these were revolutionary times in India. In 1882, Bankim Chandra's novel Anand Mat had lit up Bengal in anti-British zeal. Inspired by the novel, Swami Pranavananda established the Bharat Sevashram Sangh in 1917. He was also a member of Anushilan, which along with Juganta were secret societies formed to fight the British. Swami Pranavananda was a friend of the Bose family.
We think of secret societies such as Anushilan and Jugantar as the hub of underground, violent, episodic revolutionary activities. However, I think we must also keep in mind that even when mass politics starts, with the rise of the non-cooperation movement and coming of Gandhi, a number of people who were part of Anushilan and Yugantar go on to become part of mass movements as well.
Anushilan and Jugantar had an illustrious list of left-wing members. Jatindranath Mukherjee, or Bagha Jatin, was a prominent leader of this secret resistance to British rule. In 1909 and 1915, he had targeted the British with German support. The aim was to create rebellion in the British Indian Army. Both plots had failed, but the idea was planted. The revolutionaries needed army mutineers and support from Britain's enemies. Exactly what Bose did. But the British were keeping watch. Also at Cambridge was the Bose hunter, Colonel Hugh Toy of Military Intelligence, Section 2.
Colonel Hugh Toy was in the British intelligence. He always used to say that he is in MI2, but I believe he was an MI5 agent.
Toy was entrusted with the job of tracking down Bose from 1943 onwards. He followed Bose's journey from Cambridge to Saigon and beyond, even after 1945. His orders were to capture Bose and secure the treasure of the INA. The British military intelligence files on him are still classified. In 1920, at Cambridge, Abani Mukherjee invites Subash Chandra Bose to attend the 4th Congress of the Comintern in Moscow. But Bose has to return to India to join Gandhi's non-cooperation movement. Mukherjee sets up the Communist Party of India in Tashkent that year. He is wanted by the British and so secretly travels to India under the shelter of Anushilan. He has many meetings with Subhash Bose.
The Bengal Congress actually becomes quite left-leaning, and Bose in some senses inherits that left ambience that part of the Bengal Congress assumes.
In 1938, Bose becomes Congress President. Abani Mukherjee is dead by then. Bose admits other leftist members of Jugantar and Anushilan, including M.N. Roy, co-founder of the Communist Party of India, to the Congress. In 1939, these leftist members helped Bose win a second term as Congress President. But Gandhi opposes it, and Bose is ousted. World War II breaks out the same year, but the Soviets and the Germans had already signed a no-war pact. According to British Prime Minister Churchill, the Germans and Russians had agreed that India was to be regarded as part of the Russian sphere of aspiration if and when Britain collapsed.
The country will erupt if he dies in jail. What am I to do, sir? He refuses to listen to reason.
A dead Subash may turn out to be more dangerous than a live Subash.
I'm afraid I cannot guarantee that he will not die in jail.
Then set him free. Let him go home.
Sir.
But see that he is kept surrounded by a wall of men day and night.
In July 1940, Subhash Chandra Bose is put under house arrest in Calcutta for sedition. Meanwhile, Communist Party leader Achhar Singh Chinna, codenamed Larkins by the Russians, travels to Moscow to submit a report to Stalin on the Indian independence struggle. He identifies Bose as the key player.
When the communist leaders used to meet Stalin, he always used to discuss about Subhash. He had a liking for Subhash and hatred for Nehru.
Bose is under house arrest, but secretly he's plotting his escape.
See that he does not leave Calcutta. I do not want him out of my sight. Left to me, I would keep him in prison for the rest of his life.
Now Bose plans his great escape. After midnight on January 17, 1941, Bose slips out of his ancestral home on Elgin Road, Calcutta. Bose's grandnephew, Abhijit Ray, retraces Netaji's steps and recounts that famous escape.
The main plan of this great escape was charted by his elder brother, the Sri Subash Chandra Bose. He sent two of his associates to the frontier, the northwest frontier agency, to see the route and the way of escape. After the car got out from 38/2 Elgin Road, they went up to Howrah, and from Howrah they took the GT Road, and from GT Road they went to Barari in a place called Dhanbad. And night of 18th of January, where he caught the Kalka mail from Gomo, went up to Peshawar. Up from Peshawar, he went to Kabul.
In February 1941, Chinna organizes Bhagat Ram Talwar to successfully escort Bose across the border to Kabul. In Kabul, contacts help Bose to get an Italian passport from the ambassador, Pietro Quaroni.
Actually, Quaroni is the main person who helped him to get out of Afghanistan because his wife was a Soviet Russian.
Meanwhile, Britain's Special Operations Executive has orders to assassinate Bose, en route to Europe via Turkey. They fear he may cause rebellion in the ranks of the British Indian Army deployed overseas. However, Bose is traveling under a new Italian identity across the Soviet Union to Berlin. On January 17, 1941, Subash Chandra Bose makes a daring escape from house arrest in Calcutta. He begins his incredible journey. He travels via Kalka Mail from Gomo all the way to Peshawar. From Peshawar, with Bhagat Ram Talwar as his guide, Bose makes his way on foot to Kabul. From Kabul, Bose drives by car to Samarkand via Termez. At Samarkand, he boards the Soviet rail network that takes him to Moscow. From Moscow, he takes a Luftwaffe aircraft to Tempelhof Airport in Berlin, Germany. In April 1941, Bose, now under the Italian identity of Count Orlando Mazzotta, arrives in Germany. This is familiar territory. Bose has been to Berlin and Austria many times between 1933 and 1938. He also has an Austrian wife named Emily Schenkel in Vienna. The Germans are very courteous to their Herr Mazzotta, but they deny him access to the man whose support he seeks, Adolf Hitler. While the Soviets are unable or unwilling to help Bose, Germany has a pact with the USSR that restricts them from interfering in India. But soon, things change. In June 1941, the Nazis break their no-war pact and invade Russia. Hitler now plans a German-dominated post-war world. British India is to be invaded via Russia. Bose volunteers to raise a regiment of Indian prisoners of war interned in Germany. He is successful in enlisting 3,000 Indian soldiers out of the 40,000 POWs. Bose's Free Indian Legion now becomes a regiment in the German army, the Wehrmacht. In the early 1940s, when mass media channels were few, public opinion was shaped by propaganda. This often took the form of posters like these. Here, the INA and the Axis powers show the British and their allies struggling in the war. In the summer of 1942, Bose finally meets Hitler. But nothing conclusive emerges. Only months later, Hitler's Nazi armies lose the Battle of Stalingrad. All plans for the German invasion of India are scrapped. For Bose to remain relevant in the war against the British, an alliance with the dominant Japanese in Southeast Asia is now the only option. British propaganda undermined Bose's new alliance. In 1942, an army of almost 40,000 Indian soldiers surrendered to the Japanese in Malaysia and Singapore. Captain Mohan Singh organizes them into the Indian National Army. However, he is involved in a bitter leadership struggle with Bengal revolutionary Rash Bihari Bose, now a Japanese citizen. Subhash Bose is a viable alternative. The Japanese persuade Hitler to provide a brand new submarine to transport Bose from Germany. It sets sail from Kiel in February 1943 with Bose and his aide Abid Hussain on board. The submarine makes a stealth voyage through the Atlantic Ocean to Madagascar. Here, Bose transships to a Japanese submarine. From Sumatra, Bose flies to Tokyo to meet Japanese Prime Minister General Tojo. The general is very impressed with Bose and agrees to support the cause of Indian independence. On July 2nd, 1943, Bose flies from Tokyo to Singapore. Here, Rash Bihari Bose declares him head of both the Indian National Army and the Provisional Government of Azad Hind. On January 7, 1944, the Southern Japanese Army, led by Field Marshal Terauchi, invades India from Burma. The INA is part of the attack. In February, the INA crosses into India in the Arakan and Imphal sectors. But these victories are short-lived. By May 1944, the tide of battle turns against the Japanese and the INA. British air superiority and the drying up of Japanese supply lines result in a decimation of Japanese forces. The monsoon and malaria add to their misery. By July, the combined INA and Japanese withdrawal from Indian territory begins. In less than a year, the bulk of the INA surrenders to the British in Rangoon. Bose retreats to Bangkok. How will the fight continue? On August 6, 1945, America drops the atom bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki is bombed and the Soviets invade Manchuria. Imperial Japan surrenders. But the theater of war in Asia is geographically spread out, so the surrender is not synchronized. But Japanese ally Subash Chandra Bose must keep the fight for Indian independence alive. The only viable option is to seek asylum in Soviet territory. There is still no clarity on what exactly happens to Bose after August 18, 1945, the day of his death or disappearance. But what is clear is that even in absentia and out of the public eye, Bose set the ball rolling for India's independence. Officially, the British accepted Bose's death in the plane crash. But some believe that they continue to hunt for Bose. Author and historian Prashant More spent his time between Paris and Pondicherry. He reveals that his grandfather, Leon Pruchandi, based in Saigon, was a key figure in Bose's operations in Southeast Asia.
Leon Pruchandi was my maternal grandfather. As far as French Indochina is concerned, Leon Pruchandi was one of the main financiers of the Indian independence movement started by Subash Chandra Bose. He not only gave his house for it to function as the Secretariat of Indian Independence League, according to family sources, he has given to the INA movement and to the Indian Independence League to the tune of many millions.
In the summer of 1943, Netaji visits Saigon, then under French rule. Leon Pruchandi garlands him with a solid gold necklace. It establishes a relationship of trust between the two men. Saigon is home to many wealthy Indians. Pruchandi leans on them to finance the Indian Independence League and INA operations for Indian independence.
From the information that I have from my mother, I can confirm that Subhash Chandra Bose did not spend the night of 17th to 18th August 1945 at Turin as it is popularly believed.
According to More, the day Bose supposedly died in the plane crash in Taipei, he was actually in Leon Pruchandi's mansion in Saigon. Bose entrusted the INA's substantial finances to Pruchandi. On August 18, 1945, the Japanese surrender and the Second World War ends. The indigenous Vietnamese freedom fighters, called the Viet Minh, now displace the Japanese administration. On September 2nd, 1945, Major General Douglas Gracie, commanding the 20th Indian Division, arrives in Saigon and proceeds to deploy martial law. Days later, Major Hugh Toy appears in Saigon on the trail of Bose.
Colonel Hugh Toy took me to his house. Then he pulled a drawer. The whole drawer was full of files after files and files. I just looking, no, you just look at it. I'm not going to allow you to touch it or go through it. This is all about Subash Chandra Bose. He came closer to me and said, but listen, how much money do you know? The wealth of tin plantation, the wealth of rubber plantation, the wealth, the chettiers they have given, the wealth and other way the wealth. I said, how much? In your rupee, it will come 72,000 crores.
The Viet Minh identify Pruchandi as the key resource to secure both Subhash Chandra Bose as well as the INA's war chest. More believes that Leon Pruchandi was subjected to 3 months of sustained abuse at the hands of the British and then the French. He was finally released by the French secret police at Bot Catinat in Saigon. But for the remaining 21 years of his life, Pruchandi never spoke a word. His properties in Saigon were confiscated, his family relocated to Pondicherry, where he lived an invalid and died unsung. The Pruchandi account raises yet another question in the enduring mystery of Subhash Chandra Bose.
Поэтому я думаю, что если бы такая официальная просьба поступила бы от руководства Индии, лично, так сказать, адресована на имя президента России, то только это бы дало бы ответ на все вопросы.
Was Bose in Russia after August 18, 1945? Is he the Tashkent man? If so, why did he not return to India? Perhaps it was because India was a British dominion until January 26, 1950. Having sought support from the Axis powers, Netaji had waged war against the British Crown. Or were there other reasons? Is the Bose mystery an international conspiracy of silence? Does the evidence lie in foreign archives? Does the government of India already have the answers? Or will the truth emerge in private investigations?